Carl Jung. The moment you become obsessed with yourself, everything changes. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." In a world that constantly demands our attention, turning that focus inward can feel revolutionary. But what if the very act of becoming obsessed with yourself, your thoughts, patterns, and hidden motives wasn't selfish, but the first step toward real transformation? In today's episode from Spiritual Wisdom, we'll explore how deep self-awareness can completely change the way you see the world and your place in it. Have you ever experienced a moment when self-reflection shifted everything for you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your insight might just inspire someone else's awakening. 1. True transformation begins when you turn inward. Most people live in the shadow of other people's opinions, constantly trying to fit into molds that were never meant for them. But the real miracle happens when you shift your obsession from how others see you to how deeply you understand yourself. This is not ego, it is awakening. When you begin to turn inward, to observe the landscapes of your own mind and emotions, something extraordinary begins to unfold. You start to see that your thoughts, reactions, and desires have been shaped by years of conditioning, and that your power lies not in trying to change others, but in knowing yourself so profoundly that external approval no longer defines your worth. Becoming constructively obsessed with self-understanding means falling in love with the process of self-inquiry. You begin to ask, "Why do I react this way?" instead of, "What will they think of me?" That simple shift transforms your life from a performance into a practice. You notice how your body tenses when you betray your truth, and how it relaxes when you honor it. You start listening to the whispers of your intuition, the subtle nudges that once went unnoticed beneath the noise of constant distraction. This is where spirituality becomes real, not in lofty ideas, but in the quiet moments when you choose awareness over autopilot, authenticity over acceptance. Every breath, every pause, every honest reflection becomes a doorway to spiritual awakening. True spirituality is not about escaping the world, but about meeting it with a deeper consciousness. When you understand yourself, you stop projecting your pain onto others. You stop mistaking chaos for connection or validation for love. You begin to realize that people's opinions are mirrors reflecting their own stories, not your identity. That realization frees you. You start to detach from the need to prove, impress, or defend, because your inner world has become enough. And in that stillness, you discover a new kind of strength, the strength of inner alignment. As your awareness grows, you learn to observe your patterns without judgment. You see your fears, not as enemies, but as messengers pointing toward the parts of yourself that long to be healed. You meet your shadow with compassion and your light with humility. The more you understand your inner contradictions, the more you begin to live in harmony with them. And through this integration, your energy shifts, your presence becomes magnetic, your words more intentional, and your actions more aligned. Others can feel it, even if they cannot name it. This is the natural byproduct of spiritual awakening. Peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, confidence that doesn't need attention, and joy that quietly radiates from self-knowledge. This inward journey is not a destination, but a daily devotion. You practice awareness through reflection, meditation, and honest self-talk. You start to measure success not by what you gain, but by what you release old fears, false identities, inherited expectations. You begin to see that every experience, pleasant or painful, is a lesson designed to bring you closer to your essence. And the more you commit to understanding yourself, the more you realize that life has been communicating with you all along through your emotions, your relationships, and even your challenges. The purpose of all of it is not to break you, but to bring you home to yourself. Comment below. I choose to look within. If you're ready to begin your true transformation. 2. Healthy self-obsession versus narcissism. Carl Jung once drew a vital distinction between selfishness and autonomy, teaching that true growth begins not in isolation from the world, but in understanding oneself so deeply that one's very presence enriches it. When you become healthily obsessed with yourself, it's not an act of ego, it's an act of awakening. It means nurturing your mind, emotions, spirit, and body to align with your highest potential, so you can serve the world from fullness rather than from emptiness. In spirituality, this is the essence of spiritual development. You stop seeking approval and begin embodying authenticity. Every thought, every emotional reaction, every inner realization becomes a part of your evolution. You start to see that knowing yourself is not selfish, it's sacred work. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." That realization is not merely poetic. It's a call to action for conscious living, where you take responsibility for your inner state and use it as a foundation for peace, purpose, and contribution. When you choose self-awareness, you choose integrity. You begin to recognize your patterns, confront your fears, and accept your emotions without judgment. This inner work transforms you into someone grounded, clear, and compassionate. You learn that peace does not come from controlling the world around you, but from mastering the world within you. In this sense, healthy self-obsession becomes a spiritual practice. It's about refining your inner instrument so that life's music can flow through you harmoniously. Unlike narcissism, which thrives on attention and validation, healthy self-focus draws its power from silence, reflection, and truth. You no longer chase validation because your worth is no longer negotiable. The more you grow inwardly, the less dependent you become on external praise. You radiate calm confidence, rooted in the knowing that your purpose is not to impress, but to express. This kind of spiritual development brings depth to every part of your existence. When challenges arise, you no longer see them as punishments, but as mirrors reflecting the parts of you that crave understanding. You start to treat your pain as a teacher, not an enemy, and your solitude as a sanctuary rather than a prison. By turning inward, you cultivate clarity. By embracing your shadow, you discover compassion. Jung's wisdom reminds us that no one can escape the task of self-knowledge. To live unconsciously is to live in chaos, but to live consciously is to align with divine order. You realize that your energy influences everything: the way you speak, create, and love. The more harmonious your inner world becomes, the more effortlessly you elevate the outer world around you. And so, healthy self-obsession is not about closing yourself off. It's about opening yourself up to the infinite potential that lives within. When you are spiritually awake, every breath, every thought, and every action becomes an expression of higher consciousness. You become both student and teacher of your own soul. learning through awareness, and guiding through example. This is the highest form of service, to embody truth so deeply that your life itself becomes a message. Through this journey, you learn that self-awareness is not self-centeredness, it is self-mastery. And the greatest gift you can offer the world is a self that is whole, healed, and awakened. 3. The 4 dimensions of personal growth. The mind is the starting point of transformation, the invisible workshop where your life is quietly designed every single day. As Carl Jung taught, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Protect this inner space fiercely, for everything that enters it eventually shapes your reality. When you begin to feed your mind with truth, reflection, and intentional learning instead of endless noise, comparison, or distraction, you reclaim control over your destiny. Think of your thoughts as seeds. What you allow to take root will soon bloom into your habits, your mood, and your worldview. Feed your intellect with what elevates you. Choose silence over chaos, and let awareness replace automatic reaction. This simple act of protecting your mental space is the foundation of spiritual wisdom. For an awakened mind no longer follows the crowd. It creates its own direction. Your emotions, too, are not enemies to fight, but teachers to listen to. Jung reminded us that emotions are not caused by events, but by the interpretations we assign to them. When you learn to watch your feelings without judging them, you begin to see how they mirror your inner state. Anger reveals where boundaries have been crossed. Sadness shows you what your soul cherishes, and fear points towards something sacred you are meant to protect. The more you practice this awareness, the more emotional maturity replaces emotional reactivity. In every moment of discomfort, ask yourself, what meaning am I creating right now? That question shifts you from being a victim of life to a student of it. Over time, you will notice peace quietly replacing chaos, not because life has become easier, but because you have learned to respond with consciousness instead of reaction. Spirit is the deepest layer, the quiet essence that reminds you there is more to life than achievements, possessions, or approval. True fulfillment begins when you connect to purpose, when you ask yourself, why am I here? What truly matters? These questions act as light posts on the road of self-awareness. As Friedrich Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." When your life is guided by meaning, decisions become clearer, distractions lose power, and even challenges transform into sacred assignments. This is the realm of spiritual awakening, when success is no longer defined by what you have, but by how aligned you are with your inner truth. Spiritual clarity brings coherence. Your thoughts, words, and actions begin to flow in harmony, and peace becomes your natural state. The body, often forgotten in the spiritual journey, is not a vessel to neglect, but a temple to honor. Physical vitality fuels mental sharpness and spiritual depth. Each act of care, exercise, rest, nourishment is an act of reverence toward life itself. Treat your body as sacred, not because of how it looks, but because of what it allows you to experience and create. Movement becomes a form of gratitude. Rest becomes an offering to clarity, and food becomes a way to sustain the energy that supports your spiritual path. The more disciplined you are with your physical well-being, the more balanced your inner world becomes. When these 4 dimensions of mind, emotions, spirit, and body work together, you step into the fullness of who you truly are. You think clearly, feel deeply, act purposefully, and live harmoniously. This is the essence of Carl Jung's teaching and the foundation of spiritual wisdom. Wholeness is not achieved by escaping any part of yourself, but by bringing all parts into conscious harmony. When you begin to cultivate this balance every day, even in small ways, your life transforms quietly from the inside out, and everything that once felt scattered finally begins to make sense. If this exploration of the 4 dimensions of personal growth has inspired you to look deeper within, make sure to subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom for more insights on spirituality and self-mastery. Your journey toward spiritual awakening starts from within. So stay connected and keep evolving with us. 4. The resistance you will face. When you start focusing on yourself, resistance begins to surface from others, from society, and even from the very voice inside your mind. People may begin to call you selfish, distant, or strange, because society has taught us that self-focus is a flaw instead of a form of healing. Yet, neglecting yourself is what truly drains you, leaving you resentful, tired, and spiritually disconnected. You can only give love, energy, and wisdom to others when you are filled within. The moment you look inward, you enter the sacred path of spirituality, where spiritual awakening is no longer an idea, it becomes your lived experience. You begin to see that caring for your inner world is not self-absorption, but self-alignment, not selfishness, but the foundation of real compassion. When you take time to nurture your own energy, your presence becomes a source of calm and light to those around you without you even trying. Still, your own mind will resist. It will whisper that you are wasting time, that you are being too focused on yourself, that you might lose people's approval. These thoughts are echoes of conditioning that trained you to measure your worth by how much you do for others. But spiritual growth means reversing that conditioning. You begin to see that love without self-respect is emptiness, and giving without renewal is exhaustion. The truth is, spirituality calls you to fill your own cup first, so that your giving comes from abundance, not depletion. When your inner world is balanced, every word, every act, and every silence radiates peace. That is the beginning of true spiritual awakening. The realization that your soul is not something to fix, but something to remember. Yet this remembrance often comes with pain. The path to awareness demands solitude, honesty, and courage. Friends may misunderstand your silence. Loved ones may not comprehend your need for space. They might think you have changed, and they will be right, you have. You are changing in the direction of truth. Jung called this process individuation, the transformation of a person into their most authentic self. It is not easy to walk away from patterns that once defined you, or to detach from identities that made you feel accepted. But every act of alignment, every no that honors your peace, and every yes that reflects your purpose brings you closer to wholeness. It is through this inner work that you begin to live from awareness instead of reaction, from truth instead of habit. As time passes, the resistance you once felt becomes revelation. You begin to see that solitude is not isolation. It is the temple where divine wisdom speaks. The fear that once held you back becomes your greatest teacher, showing you where your boundaries were weak and where your light needed tending. You realize that the more you fill yourself with love, clarity, and spiritual truth, the more naturally you inspire others to do the same. Your life becomes an expression of quiet strength. Your energy turns magnetic, and your spirit becomes untouchable by external chaos. When you become deeply devoted to understanding yourself, everything changes. Your relationships evolve, your priorities refine, your energy stabilizes. You stop chasing approval and start embodying peace. That is the moment when spirituality ceases to be a belief and becomes your way of being, when spiritual awakening turns resistance into rebirth and self-focus into the purest form of love. 5. Practical transformations. When you start turning inward and facing yourself with honesty and compassion, everything around you begins to change in subtle but profound ways. Jung called this process a practical transformation, a return of energy, clarity, and meaning through the practice of self-compassion. Many of his clients discovered that when they stopped judging their emotions and instead treated themselves with understanding, their minds grew quieter, their hearts softened, and their decisions became clearer. You begin to notice that what once drained you now teaches you. What once triggered you now reveals something valuable about your own growth. This kind of self-centeredness is not selfishness. It is a form of inner alignment that allows you to stand firmly in your own truth without collapsing under guilt or external pressure. As you cultivate this gentle focus on yourself, patience begins to grow naturally. You stop rushing to fix things and start allowing life to unfold at its own rhythm. Creativity flows more freely because you are no longer creating from fear or comparison, but from connection and authenticity. Genuine love begins to take root because it is no longer dependent on approval. It grows from your inner fullness. Your relationships deepen as you become more emotionally aware. Your conversations become softer, yet more truthful, and the energy in your home shifts from tension to peace. This is spirituality in action, not a distant ideal, but a living, breathing expression of spiritual development in your daily behavior and choices. When you practice self-compassion, you no longer seek perfection. Instead, you learn to work with your imperfections as sacred material for growth. You start forgiving yourself for past mistakes, learning from them without shame, and allowing yourself to evolve. You discover that clarity doesn't come from control, but from honesty. The more you understand yourself, your wounds, your desires, your limitations, the more capable you become of understanding others. Jung often said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." In this process, every act of self-acceptance becomes a quiet revolution. Every boundary you set becomes a declaration of peace. And every time you choose kindness over criticism, you reclaim lost fragments of your soul. You will notice that your world changes not because others suddenly behave differently, but because your perception becomes clearer. Energy once wasted on judgment and resentment is now available for creation, contribution, and connection. You no longer need chaos to feel alive. Meaning returns through simple, mindful acts, a shared meal, a creative project, a moment of stillness at the end of the day. As you become more centered, you bring harmony wherever you go. Your family feels safer around your calm energy. Your community benefits from your grounded presence, and your love becomes an anchor in a restless world. To apply this in your own life, begin small. Each morning, place a hand on your heart and remind yourself, "I will meet myself with honesty and kindness today." When challenges arise, instead of criticizing yourself, ask, What is the most loving next step? Protect your energy by saying no when something drains you and yes when it nourishes you. End each day by acknowledging one moment when you were patient, one when you were creative, and one when you chose love. These simple acts of awareness accumulate into transformation. Through them, your energy returns, your purpose sharpens, and your heart opens. And this is the essence of spirituality, not an escape from reality, but a deep engagement with life, where your self-understanding becomes the foundation of all genuine spiritual development. Do you agree that real growth begins when spiritual wisdom becomes practice, not theory? If you do, write it boldly in the comments. I live what I learn. 6. Practical tools for conscious living. Carl Jung taught that true transformation begins the moment you turn your attention inward, not out of vanity, but out of spiritual wisdom, the kind that reshapes your reality from within. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. This awakening begins when you give yourself what Jung might call sacred hours, 15 to 60 minutes each day, devoted entirely to your personal evolution. Whether you read something that feeds your soul, sit in meditation, move your body with mindfulness, or simply breathe in silence, you signal to your subconscious that your inner life matters. Over time, these small rituals shift your energy, grounding you in calm awareness even when the world around you feels uncertain. Consistency turns ordinary moments into sacred acts, reminding you that presence is not something to chase, but something to choose. Once a week, conduct what Jung called a life audit, an honest reflection on how your time aligns with your authentic values. Ask yourself, did I live in harmony with what truly matters to me? Write down where your energy went and whether it nourished or drained you. This simple act turns unconscious living into intentional living because, as Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Awareness gives you back the power to decide where your focus belongs. If you notice that your best hours were spent on distractions, forgive yourself and redirect your energy. If you find small habits that make you feel alive, writing, meditating, walking, protect them fiercely, for these are the roots of inner strength. Equally essential is learning the art of love boundaries, saying no to anything that doesn't honor your authentic self. Every yes that betrays your truth slows your individuation, the sacred process of becoming who you truly are. Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." When you say no, you are not rejecting others. You are respecting your soul. Boundaries keep your energy sacred. They remind you that love is not endless sacrifice, but honest alignment. To make this real, practice graceful refusals. Thank you for thinking of me, but I can't give this my best right now. Notice how your energy begins to expand when it is no longer scattered by obligation. Your focus deepens, your creativity awakens, and your peace of mind grows stronger. These 3 practices, sacred hours, weekly reflection, and love boundaries work together as the foundation of conscious living. Your daily ritual nurtures your clarity. Your weekly audit sharpens your awareness, and your boundaries protect the space where transformation happens. As you integrate them, you begin to live not by reaction, but by intention. The shift is subtle but powerful. Your choices align with your values. Your energy flows where it truly matters, and life stops feeling like survival. It becomes a deliberate act of creation. The moment you become lovingly obsessed with your own truth, as Carl Jung's spiritual wisdom reveals, everything begins to change, not suddenly, but naturally, as morning light quietly replaces the dark. 7. The goal: individuation and wholeness. Carl Jung taught that the purpose of life is not to become perfect, but to become whole. Individuation is the sacred process through which the scattered fragments of your being finally meet one another and merge into unity. It is not a sudden revelation, but a slow awakening, the light of self-awareness spreading gently through the corridors of your inner world. When you stop chasing validation and start aligning your life with your true self, you step into a dimension of spirituality that feels both raw and liberating. You begin to sense that peace is not something to find outside, but something you awaken within by embracing every hidden aspect of who you are. Individuation demands honesty. It asks you to look into the shadow of the parts of you you've rejected, feared, or disowned, and to listen to them with compassion. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Each time you bring awareness to your hidden motives, repressed desires, or unhealed wounds, you reclaim power that was once trapped in fear. This is the essence of spiritual awakening, not becoming pure light, but integrating the light and darkness into a balanced, living whole. You realize that the traits you once condemned can become tools of growth when transformed through understanding. Anger can turn into assertiveness, sensitivity into intuition, and pain into empathy. As you integrate these fragments, your inner world begins to harmonize. You stop being torn between the person you show to the world and the one you secretly are. The endless need to please, impress, or prove starts to fade because you no longer build your worth on external approval. You understand that authenticity is your natural state and alignment is your birthright. When you act from this center, your choices no longer come from fear or guilt, but from clarity and inner truth. You start saying no without anxiety, yes without hesitation, and your peace no longer depends on circumstances, but on integrity. This transformation expresses itself in daily life in quiet yet profound ways. You begin to choose work that nourishes your purpose rather than merely feeding your ego. You attract relationships that honor your growth instead of mirroring your wounds. You treat your body not as an enemy to discipline, but as a sacred vessel for awareness. Even the simplest habits, breathing deeply before reacting, reflecting before deciding, resting before collapsing, become acts of spiritual wisdom. In time, you see that this inner alignment doesn't isolate you from the world, but connects you to it more genuinely. The deeper you walk this path, the more you recognize that spirituality is not an escape from humanity, but a return to it. It's the courage to hold pain without becoming bitter, to love without losing yourself, and to live truthfully even when it costs you comfort. You notice synchronicities, subtle signals that remind you you're in tune with something greater. Life begins to feel orchestrated by meaning rather than chaos. You no longer rush to fix everything. Instead, you trust the rhythm of your unfolding. Individuation is not perfection. It's the moment when all your contradictions learn to coexist in peace. It's realizing that wholeness isn't about being unbroken, but about embracing your cracks as places where light enters. When you center your life on your authentic self, you live with purpose, clarity, and serenity. This is what Jung meant by becoming whole. Not changing into someone else, but finally becoming yourself. And when that happens, everything about your relationships, your decisions, your sense of time and truth changes too, because you have remembered who you truly are. To honor your commitment to becoming whole, speak it into existence. Comment below, "I choose wholeness," to affirm your devotion to self-awareness and inspire others to walk the path of individuation with courage. When you finally turn your gaze inward, you stop chasing validation and begin cultivating true alignment with your soul. As Carl Jung taught, transformation begins the moment you become aware of yourself, when you realize that everything you've been seeking has always been within. If this message from spiritual wisdom inspired you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos that guide you deeper into your own awakening journey. The universe only sends this video to women who are entering their most powerful phase. When a woman realizes her worth, the universe rearranges itself to match her new frequency. This isn't just poetic truth, it's energetic law. Welcome to Spiritual Wisdom, where we explore the moments when destiny whispers, and you begin to feel that something within you is shifting. This video reveals why certain women are being called into their most powerful phase, when synchronicities, intuition, and transformation align to awaken their deepest strength. As you watch, reflect on how these signs are unfolding in your own life. Have you noticed the universe sending you messages lately? Share your experiences in the comments below, because your story might inspire another woman stepping into her power. 1. Synchronicity marks the spiritual awakening. When a woman encounters a message like this, it's never random, it's synchronicity. Carl Jung described this as the mysterious intersection where inner transformation meets outer reality. It's the moment when the soul's vibration changes, and the universe mirrors that shift through subtle yet powerful signs. You may feel as though something invisible is guiding you toward truths you were always meant to discover. That feeling isn't imagination. It's the sacred response of the cosmos to your spiritual awakening. Every time a woman begins to awaken, her energy starts to communicate with life itself, sending ripples through everything she touches, aligning her with what her soul is finally ready to receive. In spirituality, synchronicity is how the universe speaks to you. It takes the invisible language of energy and translates it into moments that feel too precise to be coincidences. You notice repeated numbers, familiar songs at perfect timing, or messages that echo your innermost thoughts. These signs are confirmations, subtle reflections of your evolution. They remind you that your consciousness has expanded beyond the surface, and the outer world now bends to the rhythm of your inner world. Carl Jung taught that when the unconscious becomes active, it reorganizes your perception of reality. What used to feel like chaos begins to reveal hidden order. You start realizing that life doesn't happen to you, it happens through you. As your awareness deepens, the universe begins to rearrange your reality. People who no longer align with your vibration slowly drift away, and new connections, opportunities, and experiences appear effortlessly. This transition may feel unsettling at first, but it is the very proof that your spiritual energy is ascending. Spiritual awakening is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you've always been, beneath conditioning, fear, and self-doubt. Each moment of awareness acts like a spark that lights up the path ahead, showing you that every detour, delay, and disappointment was part of a higher orchestration guiding you toward your authentic self. When this shift occurs, your desires change. You no longer chase validation or cling to chaos. Instead, you crave peace, depth, and truth. You begin to understand that your power doesn't come from control, but from alignment. You no longer force outcomes. You allow them. You no longer beg for love. You radiate it. This is the quiet revolution of a spiritually awakened woman. Her strength becomes invisible, yet undeniable. She vibrates on a level where only authenticity survives. Every act of letting go becomes an act of creation, and every moment of solitude becomes a sanctuary of rebirth. Synchronicity, then, is not luck, it's resonance. It is the universe's way of acknowledging your readiness. When your energy harmonizes with divine timing, guidance arrives effortlessly. The right words, encounters, and experiences unfold as if written just for you. What once felt like coincidence now feels like destiny. This is the sacred dialogue between your soul and the universe, the proof that your inner world and outer reality are not separate, but reflections of the same divine consciousness moving through you. In this realization, you embody your most powerful phase, aware, aligned, and fully awakened to the truth that the universe does not send you random messages. It responds to the woman you have become. Do you feel the synchronicity calling you? If you do, declare it with faith and power in the comments. I am awakening, and the universe is aligning with me. 2. The false self must die for the true self to rise. This phase begins when everything you thought you were starts to crumble. The identities you once wore with pride, the caretaker, the achiever, the pleaser, the strong one, begin to feel like heavy costumes you can no longer carry. You may feel physically drained, emotionally detached, or deeply confused, as if life has stripped you bare. But what's really happening is far more profound. The psyche is declaring that it can no longer sustain the false self. This collapse is not your failure, it's your initiation. It is the universe's way of preparing you for the rise of your true essence. Carl Jung called this process the death of the persona, the symbolic shedding of all illusions that once defined who you were. When the false self dies, the soul finally breathes freely, and the journey of spiritual development begins. You begin to sense that the world you once built no longer fits. The conversations that once entertained you feel shallow. The ambitions that once fueled you seem meaningless, and the relationships that once defined you start to dissolve. This disorientation is sacred. It's your spirit untangling from the noise of conformity. The woman you used to be, who tolerated disrespect, who silenced her voice to keep the peace, who chased validation instead of truth, is fading. And though this transition feels like loss, it is actually liberation. Jung once wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." You are being pushed to evolve beyond superficial roles and into the wholeness of your being. This is not a punishment. It's a spiritual refinement, stripping away what is false so that your true light can finally emerge. In this silence, you start to meet yourself again. It's not an easy reunion. You will notice parts of you that you've buried under years of pretending, the intuitive voice you ignored, the dreams you postponed, the wild spirit you tried to tame. But as you reconnect with these forgotten aspects, something miraculous happens. The emptiness turns into peace. What felt like destruction becomes rebirth. Your energy begins to stabilize, your emotions align, and your intuition starts to guide you again. This is spirituality in its truest form, not an idea or philosophy, but a direct experience of transformation. You are not becoming someone new. You are remembering who you've always been beneath the layers of survival. During this process, you will notice synchronicities appearing, numbers repeating, songs that echo your emotions, strangers who deliver perfect messages at the right time. These are not coincidences. They are signs from the universe confirming your realignment. Jung described this phenomenon as synchronicity, the intersection between inner change and outer reality. When you see these signs, understand that your vibration has shifted and the external world is beginning to mirror your inner awakening. Every coincidence is a divine echo, reassuring you that you are no longer living unconsciously, but consciously co-creating with the universe. This transformation demands courage, for the false self does not surrender easily. It clings, whispers, and tempts you back into old patterns of fear and familiarity. But the soul knows the way forward. The more you trust the unraveling, the more power returns to you. You begin to understand that spirituality is not about rising above your humanity. It's about integrating it with grace. True spiritual development comes when you stop seeking validation from others and begin honoring your own sacred truth. The universe sends this phase only to women who are ready to awaken, who have outgrown survival and are being called into creation. The pain, the confusion, the solitude are not random. They are the signs that the old structure of your life is dissolving, so that something infinitely more authentic can emerge. The false self must die for the true self to rise. And from that rising comes a power so serene, so unshakable, that no external force can ever define you again. Are you ready to let go of your false self and rise into your true power? If you are, comment below, "I am rising," to affirm your transformation and inspire other women stepping into their most powerful phase. 3. Withdrawal is incubation, not depression. Withdrawal is not a collapse. It is a sacred incubation, a divine process where your soul begins to recreate itself in silence. When life starts to pull you inward, when you feel exhausted by noise, and when solitude becomes your only safe place, understand that this is not depression, it is transformation. As Carl Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. You are not falling apart, you are being reassembled into a more powerful version of yourself. This retreat is a womb of spiritual wisdom, where the old layers of your identity quietly dissolve to make space for something far more authentic. The woman you were is no longer enough for the life your soul is preparing to live, and so the universe gently isolates you, not as punishment, but as protection, giving you time to grow unseen until you are ready to rise again. As your energy shifts, you begin to notice a deep disconnection from things and people that once felt familiar. It's not rejection, it's redirection. Jung believed that solitude is essential for individuation, the process of becoming whole. The discomfort you feel in this stillness is the soul stretching into new dimensions of itself. You are shedding the weight of old expectations, outdated attachments, and borrowed identities. You are no longer trying to fit into spaces that diminish your frequency because you are learning that peace is more valuable than approval. Every woman who rises must first withdraw. You are in the sacred, in between the space where your old self dies, so your true self can finally breathe. In this womb of silence, nothing may seem to move on the surface, but deep within, divine activity is taking place. Like a seed buried beneath the soil, your transformation happens in the dark, away from the world's eyes. You are being prepared for alignment, for deeper intuition, for an unshakable awareness of who you are. Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." Your awakening is happening not through doing, but through being. Each quiet day, each moment of fatigue, each tear shed in solitude is not a setback. It is sacred work. You are learning to sit with yourself, to hold your emotions, to trust your inner rhythm rather than the external pace of the world. This is not isolation. It is initiation. The universe calls certain women into this silence because they are meant to carry greater light. You are being emptied so that truth can fill you. When you stop trying to explain yourself, when you no longer need others to understand your journey, you step into a state of inner authority. Your energy starts to speak louder than your words. You no longer chase connection. You attract it effortlessly. This is the rebirth of feminine power, the soft, magnetic strength that doesn't seek validation but radiates from within. So when your spirit feels weary or withdrawn, remember, you are not broken, you are becoming. Your solitude is not a void. It is a sacred space where your next chapter is being written by the hands of the divine. 4. Archetypal transformation. From maiden to queen. The transition from seeking validation to embodying inner authority is the sacred metamorphosis of the soul. The passage from the maiden, who is defined by the world, to the queen, who defines herself. This transformation is not bound by time or age, but by spiritual readiness. A moment when a woman's consciousness begins to shift from dependence on the external to trust in the internal. The maiden looks outward for reflection, love, and approval, while the queen turns inward and realizes she was always the mirror, always the source. In this stage of spiritual awakening, her energy begins to circulate differently, no longer leaking into the opinions of others, but moving like an unshakable current of divine awareness within her. Carl Jung saw such changes as archetypal patterns of the psyche, representing not just growth, but initiation. The queen archetype is the full embodiment of a woman who has integrated her shadows and reclaimed her power without apology. She is no longer fragmented between who she was told to be and who she truly is. Her presence carries authority without force, grace without submission, strength without aggression. She no longer performs, she emanates. She no longer pleads to be chosen. She understands she was never unworthy in the first place. Her sovereignty is spiritual, not social. It radiates from a consciousness aligned with truth, purpose, and divine timing. This shift often begins in silence. The world that once validated her now feels too small for her spirit. The friendships that once felt comforting may start to dissolve, and she may find herself walking alone, yet not lonely. Solitude becomes her temple, her initiation into higher wisdom. It is here that she learns to listen not to noise, but to knowing, to the subtle voice of her own intuition that whispers what logic cannot comprehend. She begins to trust the flow of energy rather than the structure of control. Realizing that every ending is merely an energetic reconfiguration, preparing her for the next level of consciousness. The Queen's ascension is not without trial. She must release the old identities that no longer serve her as the people pleaser, the caretaker, the conformist. Each layer of release feels like death, yet it is rebirth in disguise. She learns to hold her emotions without drowning in them, to set boundaries without guilt, and to speak truth without fear of rejection. This is where spiritual wisdom deepens. She understands that everything she loses is simply energy returning to source, creating space for higher alignment. In this sacred process, she becomes both the student and the teacher of her own transformation. By the time the woman fully steps into her queen energy, she no longer asks, "Am I enough?" Because she knows that her very existence is proof of divine design. The universe no longer tests her with lessons of validation, but blesses her with opportunities of creation. Her life begins to mirror her inner peace. Her words carry the vibration of authority, not because she demands respect, but because she embodies it. The Queen is the living expression of consciousness, a matured being who leads not from the crown on her head, but from the calm throne of her heart. And so, the journey from maiden to queen is the essence of spirituality itself, a return from fragmentation to wholeness, from dependency to divine autonomy. It is not a linear climb, but a spiral of remembrance, where each revolution brings her closer to her truth. The woman who completes this transformation does not conquer the world, she becomes it. She stands as a beacon of awakened energy, a reflection of the universe in human form, no longer needing to prove her light, because she finally understands she is the light. If this message resonates with your soul, and you feel the Queen within awakening, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your reflections in the comments below. Let's rise together in this journey of spiritual transformation. 5. Shadow integration unlocks true power. Shadow integration is the process of reclaiming everything you were once told to hide, reject, or silence within yourself. As a woman, you may have been conditioned to suppress your anger, ambition, sexual autonomy, and assertiveness because society often equated softness with goodness and compliance with virtue. But these qualities are not flaws. They are fragments of your original wholeness waiting to be brought back into harmony. The truth is that your shadow is not evil. It is simply unacknowledged energy. When you integrate these suppressed parts, instead of denying them, you unlock a source of power that feels both grounded and magnetic. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." In this light, true spirituality is not about transcending your humanity, but about illuminating it, transforming inner conflict into inner coherence. Anger, when integrated, becomes clarity. It teaches you where your boundaries lie and protects your energy from being misused. Ambition, once demonized as arrogance, becomes the fuel of your purpose, reminding you that desiring expansion is not greed. It is life expressing itself through you. Sexual autonomy evolves from taboo into sacred ownership of your body and desires, aligning you with the natural rhythm of creation. Assertiveness transforms from rebellion into self-respect, allowing you to express your truth without aggression. None of these traits make you harsh. They make you authentic. And authenticity is what makes a woman deeply magnetic. because she radiates integrity instead of insecurity. As your spirituality matures, your spiritual development no longer revolves around being good in the eyes of others, but being whole in the eyes of your own soul. You begin to see that enlightenment is not a halo. It is integration. You can meditate for hours, repeat affirmations, and recite prayers, but without meeting the parts of yourself you've hidden, your light remains incomplete. To live spiritually is to live truthfully, to allow the divine and the human to coexist in the same breath. This is why shadow work is not a descent into darkness, but a reclamation of light. Every emotion you once judged as wrong has wisdom to offer. Every desire you buried holds a key to your potential. The more you own your truth, the less you need to perform goodness, because peace replaces pretense. When you begin this work, life starts to reorganize itself around your newfound alignment. People who once disrespected your boundaries will either evolve with you or fade away. Opportunities that once felt out of reach will begin to appear naturally because your energy no longer repels what's meant for you. You move from chasing to attracting, from pleasing to leading, from fragmentation to flow. This is what it means to embody spiritual wisdom, to be both soft and strong, intuitive yet grounded, receptive yet commanding. You stop apologizing for existing fully. You become a mirror that reflects what divine balance truly looks like in human form. The lesson is simple but profound. Your shadow was never your enemy. It was your unlived life calling for expression. Integrating it does not make you less spiritual. It completes your spiritual development. Remember, anger is your boundaries' voice. Ambition is your creative fire. Sexual autonomy is your sacred right. And assertiveness is your truth in motion. Honor them all, and you will discover that your power was never lost. It was simply waiting for your permission to return. 6. Individuation is a sacred, solitary journey. Real transformation doesn't crave applause, validation, or recognition. It unfolds quietly in the sacred solitude of self-realization. You begin to sense that this journey isn't about becoming someone new, but about remembering who you've always been beneath the noise of expectation. Individuation, as Carl Jung called it, is the soul's rebellion against imitation. It's the moment you stop seeking permission to exist and start inhabiting the fullness of who you already are. You realize that true peace doesn't come from pleasing others or fitting into old molds. It comes from the courage to stand alone in your truth. The applause you once longed for begins to sound hollow because you've discovered something far deeper than approval: the unshakable serenity of authenticity. There comes a time when the woman who once sought belonging realizes she is already home within herself. She no longer performs to be loved or dilutes her power to be accepted. She detaches from patriarchal validation, not with anger, but with clarity, understanding that her worth was never meant to be negotiated. She becomes psychologically sovereign. Her emotions, her body, and her choices no longer subject to external judgment. In this silence, she begins to hear her true voice again, the voice that doesn't shout, but whispers direction with calm certainty. And in following that inner compass, she finds that solitude is not punishment, it is purification. Carl Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." To embody that truth, you must first unlearn the layers that were never yours, the expectations, the guilt, the roles that trained you to shrink. You begin to see that real power doesn't dominate, it radiates. You walk differently, speak differently, even breathe differently, because your energy is no longer fractured by the need to prove. Spiritual wisdom teaches that this kind of transformation happens in stillness, not noise. You don't chase your destiny. You align with it. You don't beg for respect. Your energy commands it. As you evolve, you stop mistaking detachment for indifference. You understand that boundaries are not walls. They are gates of sacred discernment. You no longer rush to explain, justify, or convince, because peace has become more valuable than being understood. You see how much energy was once spent trying to please people who never truly saw you. Now that same energy becomes fuel for your creativity, your healing, your calling. The more you honor yourself, the more the universe rearranges itself to honor you in return. Synchronicities appear in what Jung described as meaningful coincidences, reminding you that the outer world mirrors your inner alignment. You begin to notice that your calm unsettles those still at war with themselves, but you no longer take that personally. Your silence speaks louder than defense, and your presence carries an authority that doesn't need to demand. This is the sacred, solitary road to individuation, where you finally understand that being alone is not the absence of love, but the presence of self. As you walk it, you transform not through effort, but through surrender. You stop trying to fix, control, or chase, and instead, you simply embody. Because once a woman becomes whole, she no longer needs the world to validate her existence. She becomes the validation herself. Have you ever walked the path of solitude and found strength within it? If you've experienced this sacred journey, share your story in the comments below so others may be inspired. And if you're just beginning, comment, "I am ready," to honor your own path of individuation. 7. Your evolution heals the collective. This is not a coincidence. It is a sacred confirmation. Every woman who begins to awaken is not merely changing her own life. She is shifting the vibration of the entire collective feminine. When your spirit heals, it sends invisible ripples through the timeline of your ancestry and forward into generations yet unborn. The ache you once carried is being rewritten into light, because your personal healing is the medicine that countless others have prayed for. Spirituality, at its essence, reveals that everything is connected. So when you rise, the feminine within the collective rises too. The patterns that once held your lineage in silence, fear, or self-doubt are dissolving as you awaken to your truth. This is how the universe speaks through transformation that begins in one soul, but echoes across time. You are entering your most powerful phase, the season when you stop apologizing for your light and start understanding that power does not mean control, it means alignment. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And that is exactly what your awakening is doing, turning old fate into new freedom. What once triggered you now teaches you. What once broke you now builds you. This is not weakness, it is initiation. The universe didn't send this message to convince you, but to confirm that you are remembering who you truly are, a woman whose energy reshapes reality. Your spiritual awakening is not about escaping pain. It's about transmuting it. The suffering of the past becomes the soil where wisdom grows. When you learn to feel without drowning, speak without fear, and love without losing yourself, you restore harmony to both your inner world and the collective feminine field. The universe celebrates every boundary you set, every truth you speak, and every act of self-respect you practice, because those are signals of evolution. And evolution is contagious. Your authenticity inspires others to wake up, to question, to heal, to rise. Notice how life now mirrors your growth. The conversations that drain you begin to fade, and the people who vibrate with your new frequency suddenly appear. That's not coincidence. That's energy, aligning with energy. Your body feels it too. Your breath steadies. Your creativity flows again, and peace begins to feel familiar. This is spirituality in motion, a return to wholeness, a remembering that your worth was never lost. As your light stabilizes, your presence becomes medicine. Without forcing anyone to change, you change everything around you simply by being. So when the universe whispers, "Keep going," it's reminding you that your journey is not just personal, it's archetypal. You are living proof that healing is possible, that softness and strength can coexist, that love is not weakness, but the highest intelligence. Through your evolution, generations heal. Through your courage, the collective awakens. Through your faith, the future becomes brighter. You are not alone. You are the living embodiment of divine timing, and the universe moves through you as it says once more, "Keep going." You are entering your most powerful phase, and the world feels it. As you step into this powerful new phase of your life, remember nothing that's unfolding is random. The universe is aligning perfectly with your inner transformation, revealing the strength, wisdom, and grace you were always meant to embody. Trust the timing of your awakening and walk boldly into your purpose. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming videos that continue to guide your journey of spiritual awakening and self-mastery.